Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome back. Today I'm going to teach you how you can build this AI agent swarm team, which will essentially act as your personal AI assistant 24/7, right? So let me give you a breakdown of what it does. So here we have the core AI agent that basically handles tool AI agents, and we have email agent, calendar agent, and web agent, right? So email agent essentially has an access to your Gmail, and it can do everything in your Gmail, right? So for example, it can read your emails, it can reply to your emails, it can tell you what kind of emails you got within the last couple of hours. You can ask agent essentially to create an email, put it in a draft, and maybe help you to summarize email based on some events. And then we have calendar agent, which essentially has access to your Google Calendar, right? So for example, if you receive an email from somebody through your Gmail, and you need to schedule an event to meet with that person based on that email, you can ask an agent to now schedule that event in Google Calendar for you. And then you can say something like, hey, can you send John a summary? Or for example, let John know that we're going to be meeting on Friday at 2 p.m., right? So it's going to do the entire thing for you. So this AI agent essentially is handling all of these agents below it, right? And then we have web agent. And web agent essentially is a web scraper. So it has an access to Tably web API. So it can scrape the web data in real time. So for example, if you need to do a research on the latest trends in AI or tech, you can just say, hey, can you do some research based on AI trends for the past, I don't know, 5 days or 1 week. And it's going to be able to go on Google and actually scrape the latest data, right? And when I say scrape, not just by like people go on a website and just kind of go page by page, it will be able to access the entire web page data and go beyond and above and really find the data that was, for example, posted just yesterday, right? So really cool if you have a meeting with a client and you need to be up to date on the latest events in a specific niche. And what's really cool about the AI agents that can be added through tool right here, right? So if you've done or used n8n before, the way it would work, for example, here, if you look at my screen, I would need to add a agent node right here like this, right? And then we would have a AI model here. Let me just add something like OpenAI, for example, right here, right? And then we're gonna have the classic simple memory. Okay, so we'll just construct our AI agent quickly. And then we would have tools here, right? So for example, I don't know, let's give it a Gmail tool as well. And now if I would want to chain these AI agents, I would need to essentially add this AI agent to the next AI agent and that AI agent to the another AI agent, right? So it would be time consuming and sometimes the context would get lost between AI agents because the data flow is not as clean as it's in this case scenario here, right? So because this AI agent essentially is handling all these agents and it knows exactly which AI agents it has access to and what kind of tools these AI agents have access to. So it's controlling the entire data pipeline, right? So the responses is always on point and really the error margin is very minimal comparing with the old school way where we would be chaining AI agents with AI agents, for example. And it's really a pretty beginner-friendly example. So just imagine this is really just a personal assistant AI agent example, but you can do something in a sense that you can build an entire marketing team. So you can have, for example, here a CMO or a chief marketing officer agent here, and you can give it a agent tools like, I don't know, for example, marketing specialist. Then you have like email marketing specialist, social media specialist, right? And so all these sub agents will essentially have tools attached to them, right? So you can use APIs, for example, to scrape the latest data from TikTok, right? So you can use something like Apify, I believe. So you have basically APIs for TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, and you will actually have a real-time access to Instagrams, TikToks, and whatever data, right? So you can really create cool content that is trending right now. And then, for example, you can add another agent that will be generating a content, right? So you can use either ChatGPT's image API, right? So, for example, the social media specialist does the research, creates the content, adds the hashtags, and then it sends it off to a agent that will generate the actual image asset, okay? and then all of that will be processed by the CMO right here. And then you can decide either you want to receive the data on your Telegram directly on your phone, right? So you can basically do everything from the phone. Although please note that on today's example, we are using ChatNote because that's the most simple for the beginners. But if you want me to create this flow and integrate something like WhatsApp or Telegram, let me know down in the comments and I'll drop a video on that as well. So that's basically for marketing example. You can do the same flow if you are doing a research. So you can build an entire research team, right? And you can have different research assistants working under the main research agent that will then compile and put all the data together and give you the final output for the result. Okay, and then you can either log it into a Airtable or spreadsheets, or you can log it into something like Postgre database or vector database, right? And then you can perform semantic searches if you want to do so, right? So again, the options are really unlimited. So let's now kind of break it down and kind of go through each of the nodes quickly. And let me explain you how they work behind the scenes, because this is a really beginner friendly flow. So as a beginner, I really want you to understand what's happening here. So when you download this entire JSON template for free, you can open it and really adjust it based on whatever the niche you are working in, or maybe if you want to do it for a client that works as well. So at least you know how to work with this template right here, right? So let's start with the basics and with the first one. So the first one is a trigger node. So you guys already know in n8n to trigger a action in workflow, right? You need a trigger node. Well, so we have a chat trigger, then we have a Telegram, a WhatsApp, and also you can use something called webhook, right? So webhook essentially will be something if you would be triggering the action from a third-party API or third-party software. So you can do an action there, and then you can send it to n8n to trigger rest of the workflow, right? So the thing to memorize is really to do something in n8n. You need a trigger node, and in this case, we're using a chat node to trigger this entire workflow, right? So there's nothing really much to it. If I open it up, it doesn't really do anything crazy. It literally just accepts the user's input. So if I click right here on open chat, this essentially is the chat input node, right? So we use that to communicate with the agent and also to receive the response and output from the agent. So then the chat node gets connected to a agent node. And in AI agent node, we have a couple of interesting things that I think you should understand. So the first one is the prompt, and the prompt is accepting the JSON input from the previous node, right? So, and the JSON, think of JSON as a way for n8n to communicate between the nodes, right? So think of it as a language between the nodes. Again, this is really the basics of JavaScript. I will not be covering that today, but JSON originally is coming from JavaScript object-oriented programming language, right? So the way it works, we are basically taking a JSON variable. So if you look on the left side, you see something called chat input. So what it really is, if I delete all of this and I simply just drag chat input, so it's going to be exactly the same thing, right? So we are accepting the chat input, which contains user's input from the chat input node, right? So that's kind of the data pipeline flow. And then we are defining the system message prompt, okay, which is not the same as prompt. So prompt is essentially whatever the user is asking from the AI agent, right? And system message is sort of, think of it as defining the character of your AI model, how it should behave at all times, right? So every time it receives the data, it should follow these exact instructions at all times, right? So it's more of a static behavior rather than prompt, because prompt is dynamic. Every time you ask something, it's something different, so it's dynamic. But the system message is static. So we always want the AI agent or AI model to behave in this exact way, right? So we have tools. We're describing essentially tools that it has access to. Then the rules, instructions, examples. It's also always good to give examples to AI agents so they understand how to structure the outputs to the user, right? And here we're giving examples. Okay, so we're giving examples for emails. We're saying, hey, you should be structuring it in HTML because email response should be formatted in HTML since it's a standard language for emails. And then we're essentially giving a format how it should schedule meetings, right? So we want to have the event name, who is attending the meeting, the time, and essentially all the basics of the event for the data. And then we are basically ensuring that the time that a agent is using is in your time zone, right? So when we're dealing with Google Calendar events, it's really important that the time zone is correct, and that is done by using a variable $noun. And again, that's coming from JavaScript, but all you really need to remember that if you want to have timestamp in your current time zone, you're just going to be using this one right here. Then our A agent has a, well, think of it as a brain, right? Because A agent node on its own doesn't really do much. It's really an empty node, right? So we need to give it a chat model. So if we kind of look back here, on the left side, we have a GPT 4.1 mini, and here we are essentially assigning a open router account for OpenAI, and which is tied to GPT 4.1 mini. Okay, actually I want to change to 4.1 because it's more creative than the mini model. So I'm going to change that. And that's essentially the brain of the AA agent, right? And then we're giving a AA agent something called think node. Well, it's exactly what it says. So it's a node where AA agent can dump all of its sort of thoughts, right? Because AI models have a reasoning capabilities. So when it processes data, it's going to dump all of its findings and sort of results into this node. You kind of reflect on the data and decide if this data is the right one, or it should rethink and maybe change something before it sends off to the next AI agents, right? It's a pretty cool node, really simple one, but really useful when you're performing high context operations like here. Okay, and now let's move on to AI agents under the tools. Okay, so this is actually a fairly new addition. As I mentioned at the beginning, if you guys remember, we used to chain AI agents, but now we can just simply add them as a tool. So if you click on a tool and you type AI agent, you can essentially add AI agent as a tool, right? Which again makes things super easy, and you can create these crazy stacks of AI agent swarms in a really easy way. So here we have email agent, calendar agent, and web agent. Let me cover them quickly for you. So each of the agents have their own system messages, right? So in the description, we just essentially describe what kind of an agent this is. So for email, it's an email agent for all email actions. And if you guys remember, the same thing as we did with the main AI agent, each of these AI agents has its own system message, okay? Or sort of we're defining its character or behavior, how it should behave at all times when it receives the data, right? So here we're saying you are an email management assistant, and you always need to basically sign and format emails formally and use HTML. And then you need to sign it off as Arthur, okay? Because, well, I want my emails to be signed. You know, if you guys remember the way we structure emails, you always have a closing for the email, sort of a signature. So that's essentially what it does. So if you're going to be working with this workflow, don't forget to change this. Otherwise, all your emails will be signed as Arthur. Just a side note, right? And then we're giving a email management tools, because each of the tools has its chain of tools attached. So here we have all the Gmail related nodes that we want to use as tools. So again, reply, label emails with the tags, create drafts, get emails, get labels, and pretty much everything that you would need for Gmail. So we need to mention that to a agent so it understands that it has access to these tools. Okay. So the same thing for calendar agent. I'm not going to cover it in depth. Again, same thing. We are using system message template for calendar agent. Then it's attached to a Google Calendar here. And again, you might run into an issue if you will try to run this for the first time, because you need to log in with your Gmail account to be able to use the Google Calendar or Gmail, because right now it's tied to my account. In your case, it's going to break because the credentials won't be matching. So what you need to do, you need to click here on the drop-down menu, create new credential, and all you're really going to do is just sign in with your Gmail, allow to access all the events for n8n, and it's really secure. You don't need to worry about security, and allow all the access for the events. And then you will be essentially good to go for the Gmail and for the Google Calendar agents, and they'll be able to access your Gmail and your Google Calendar. And the last one, we have a web agent, and this is essentially one of the simpler ones. All it really does, it has an access to something called Tavily, and Tavily is a web scraping API platform, meaning that you have your AI agent has an access to a web scraping real time, right? So it can access anything on the website, any web page or any web page's data. It can scrape the data, it can retrieve it, it can analyze it, and it can essentially give you a summary of whatever that you requested. Okay, so for example, competitor analysis, maybe some latest trends in the AI or tech, whatever is going to be the search query. So that's essentially what it does. Okay, and it's much more powerful than just doing a basic search, right? So if you go on Google and search for something, when you go on a web page, you're going to see kind of what the front end or user facing user interface. But with the web scrapers, basically it can access everything that's happening behind the scenes, right? So all the data in the web page, it can actually access. So again, you're getting much more rich data for your research, for example. All right, so let's do a quick demo of the entire flow, and let me show you how that works in a real action. So what I'm asking is basically for a agent to find top 3 n8n topics using web search, right? And then summarize them for me and send me an email to my personal email here. And after that, create an event in Eastern time zone for next Monday to review findings, okay? So we are essentially will be trying out all the agents at the same time. So let's shoot that to a agent and let's see how it handles that. So right now it's using the web agent. It's doing the web research using Tavily. So it looks like that was successful. If I open it up, we can see here we have the URLs, the content, and the titles. So it's pulling the real-time data. Okay, so we run into a small issue. Essentially, I had the authentication issue because I forgot to switch from my old credentials to new credentials in Gmail. But once I fixed that, I was able to send the summary using the AI agent here, right? So I just asked it to redo it, and it redid it without triggering the entire flow again. Cool. So it said it sent an email and it created an event in Google Calendar. So let's go ahead and review it quickly. So if I go to my Gmail, here's the email I received from the agent, and it was nicely formatted. Okay, so we have the introduction, we have the top 3 findings here, and then we have the signature here, best regards, Arthur. Okay, so pretty cool. And now if we're gonna go to Google Calendar, here I'm looking at the August, and that's the Monday. And here we see the note 9 a.m. review and findings. Okay, that's exactly what we asked from AI agent. So it did succeed, and it didn't have any issues really understanding our request, and everything was done successfully, right? So again, just a reminder, you can download this entire JSON flow for free. So watch out for a download link below the video in the description box. There's going to be a Google Drive. And once you do, you're going to open up a new project in n8n. Then you're going to click on 3 dots right here, click import, and you will essentially have the exact same thing that you see on my screen, okay? And if you run into any issues or bugs, again, let me know in the comments and I'm going to help you out personally. And as always, if you did enjoy the content, make sure to like and subscribe and enable notifications to be notified when next video drops, because you guys already know I'm always providing free JSON templates and all kinds of free resources. And as always, I'm going to see you next time.